Genesis chapter 25. We're going to look at verses 24 through 28 in a moment. So you can find your way there. Genesis chapter 25, 24 to 28. Just prior to that, some of the things we talked about last week, we have the birth of Esau and Jacob. We talked a little bit about that. Does anybody remember kind of anything about that? Anything we talked about last week? How old is Isaac when he gets married? 40 years old. All right, so he's 40. And what's the problem with his wife? She's barren. She's barren. Sounds very familiar to another person, right? Sarah. Yeah, Sarah. And how? What does Isaac do for his wife? What's that?
He prayed to the Lord.
Yeah, he prayed. He prayed. Is prayer important?
Amen.
Is prayer powerful? Yeah. What kind of prayer is this? There's different types of prayer. What would we call this kind of prayer?
Supplication.
Okay. Supplication.
Intercessory.
Intercessory. Right. So we're coming before the Lord on behalf of someone else, praying for someone else. Now, in some ways this is, for him as well, right? Because he wants a child. But he's praying for his wife, Rebecca. Now, she's a very similar situation as Sarah, Steve had mentioned. What's the problem with being a barren woman at this time? I mean, being a barren woman, period, but at this time in history.
Look down upon her.
Yeah. Today, we might feel sorry for someone. We might, our heart might go out to them if they can't have a child and they really want one. I know brother and sister in Christ who, one of them is barren, or both of them. They can't have children. They really want children. So your heart kind of breaks for them, But we wouldn't look down upon them, right? I mean, we would feel sorry for them. We would want to encourage them in some other way. But at this time, they would look down upon. In fact, they were looked at as cursed by God or the gods, depending on, if they're part of the nations who worship idols and all of that. They're just looked upon as cursed, or they did something really, really bad, and so God or the gods of the nations are really bringing down their wrath upon them. So this has not only emotional significance, right, for Rebecca and for Isaac, but it also has social implications, right? She's going to be looked down upon, and she's going to feel less than as well. So Isaac comes before the Lord and prays. And what happens? She gets pregnant. She gets pregnant. And then she's going to have twins, right? So she's not going to just have one. She's going to have two babies, right? She's going to have two babies.
You asked for it.
Yeah, you asked for it, right? Yeah. Careful what you pray for. You might get it. Yeah. So she gets two boys. And she knows there's something wrong. And what happens?
They're
Struggling within her. And she seeks out advice, wisdom from whom?
God.
And what does God tell her? Two nations, and they're going to be struggling, right? You've got two nations in your wombs, and they're going to be struggling, and
They're two different.
Older son, the younger.
yeah, the older will serve the younger. That is a reversal. That would be really not looked upon as a good thing. Typically, the firstborn or the older is special, unique. But there's going to be a reversal here. The older is going to serve the younger. All right, so that's what's going on here. Let's look at, and let's have somebody read verses 24 to 28.
So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
All right, thank you. Okay, so how old is Isaac when his wife gives birth? 60. How long was Rebekah barren? 20 years. Now, there's a couple things to notice. Just briefly, the Bible, even here, skips a lot of years, right? We don't know what's going on for 20 years. So be careful. Sometimes we read through the scriptures and we've got a narrative and we don't actually think through. This has been a long period of time. We're not getting every single event and what's going on all this period of time. We just jumped 20 years. Isaac prayed. If you didn't catch how old he was when she gave birth, you would think it might have happened instantly, right? Wrong. This is 20 years. Unlikely that Isaac has just prayed one time, right? Probably Isaac has been praying and probably hearing and seeing his wife and all of this. So it's been 20 years that she has been barren. Do the righteous, do the elect ever suffer? Yeah, absolutely. Is Rebekah and Isaac, are they suffering?
Yes.
Sure they are, absolutely. And Isaac is the chosen, the elect in all of this, and Rebekah's his wife, and they're going to have these children. So the righteous do suffer, the elect do suffer at times. What can we learn from this?
If they suffer, we're going to suffer too.
Well, that's true.
Patience.
Okay, so patience. They suffered. The righteous people, the elect people of God, suffered at times. We're going to suffer. Here's a thing we know for sure. Either you've just come through some suffering, you're in some suffering, or what?
It's coming.
It's coming. Could be tomorrow, could be next week, right? It's coming. Suffering is promised. One of the great things about Jesus, just one, there's tons of great things about Jesus. One of the great things about Jesus, he doesn't lie. And he doesn't, just tell us what we want to hear. He actually says, you're going to suffer. You're promised you're going to suffer, but he'll walk with you through it. So there is good news there, but if we get the wrong idea, if we think, and we've got to be careful we don't do this when we're evangelizing. If we think, come to Jesus and everything's going to be great, what happens when everything's not great?
It didn't work. Jesus doesn't work.
It doesn't work. He didn't work. He's not real. It doesn't work. Something's wrong, right? Something's wrong. And so a person's faith is no longer in the resurrected, risen Lord. It's in how Jesus can make me feel and how life is going to be good for me. And listen, in Christ, things are good. There are times when things are happy and all of that. But there's times when you suffer. And sometimes you suffer really badly. Go ahead.
One of the things that concerns me in my own spiritual life is, I think what you said is absolutely true. That we go in that something, it's going to happen. That's just part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But avoiding pessimism, like getting into your mind, when's the next shoe going to drop?
Ah, yeah.
When a series of things happen at once, not just one, but
Right.
several, then you want to avoid becoming pessimistic, like
Sure.
the world says,
Sure.
you're born, you die, and that.
That's right.
So.
No, you're right. You're right.
There's a fine line between faith and unbelief sometimes.
And there's a balance there as well, right? Because, see, the thing that we know and that we have to hold on to is that this world is not my home, right? So, yes, we're going to suffer. Yes, we're going to have hardships. We're going to have great times, too. There's spuds and splits. It's probably going to be fabulous, right? We're going to strap on the feedback, right? So there's times when things are happy, and we do have abundant life and all of that. But the reality is, suffering comes. We live in a broken world. We contributed to the brokenness and all of that. But, see, our hope isn't for this life, right? It's not for the here and now. So we go through these, and we got to be careful. But if we go through these recognizing, through the flame and the flood and all that, that our hope is glory to come. And there it'll all be joy and right, it'll be all peace, and that's our hope. That's what we hold on to, not to this life, not to this world. That's why Paul says our momentary trials and sufferings and all that won't compare to the weight of glory. But you're right, if we're not careful, we can become very pessimistic. Go ahead, Gail.
I think everybody goes through suffering as part of life, even non-Christians that don't know God. But I think the ones that know God and know He's going to be with them have an easier time going through it because of that hope. But people that go through all of this that don't have God, I mean, I don't know how they get through it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, anything that a Christian goes through, any suffering or anything like that, is going to work out for their good and for God's glory. Somehow, right? So the people who suffer in the world, they might suffer just needlessly, and there's no real purpose to their suffering. For ours, it's redemptive. It's going to be redemptive, and redemptive for the world, right? Jesus' suffering on the cross was redemptive. And Paul will make this very interesting statement where he talks about filling up the sufferings of Christ, those that are lacking. Not that his death didn't pay for sin, but there's something that the church does. It's a redemptive aspect when we suffer, and we suffer in faith, that God gets the glory, we get something out of it, but there's some redemptive aspect. Maybe it draws someone to Christ. Maybe it strengthens someone else's faith. Don't know how it all works out. We just know there's a lot that goes on when a Christian suffers and goes through it, keeping their eyes on Jesus.
Peter says, if any man suffers a Christian, let him not be ashamed.
That's right. That's right, yeah. So, all good stuff. All good stuff. So sometimes we're going to suffer, and sometimes we're going to go through trials and tribulations, and we may suffer. We may go through long periods like Rebecca and Isaac. They went through 20 years. We might go through something like that. Their suffering, their sorrows were different than maybe ours, but sometimes they're short. Sometimes they're long, but God is still faithful. God is still working in the midst of all of that, right? He's doing something. So that's important for us to keep in mind. Someone whistling on me? What do we find out in verse 28?
They each have their favorites.
We find out that the home is divided. Isn't that right? There's a division in the home. Is it good or bad? Is it a good or a bad thing that there is favoritism?
It's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing. Bad thing. Absolutely. What does favoritism breed? Jealousy, envy, hatred, strife, all of that. So you might say, well, it's not that bad because they each have their own favorite, right? So each child's going to get, it's still a bad thing, isn't it? It's still a house divided. The family is still divided. And we're going to see that this causes all kinds of problems when there is favoritism. I don't know if you want to make a note physically or mentally, but you'll notice that there's a number of times through the scriptures that you'll see families, they have a favorite or one, like here you've got one, the mother has a favorite child, the father has a favorite child. We're going to keep reading on in the Genesis anyways, as well as throughout the scriptures, you'll see this favoritism, and it only breeds problems. It's not good. What would be the lesson for us today?
Don't tell your child you were in an accident or something.
Well, that's true,
I
yeah.
mean, people do that. I mean,
I never wanted you.
Like children born later.
Sure, yeah, you did.
Surprises.
Yeah.
You were a surprise.
Yeah, you were a shocker.
Yeah.
We really didn't want you.
And you hear that story.
Yeah, you kind of sad you're here.
James, some of these people may be too young to remember the Smothers Brothers. They were on TV years ago. But remember when they did the thing about mom always loved you or loved you best or something like
Right.
that? And they made a comedy,
That was hilarious.
comedy out of it.
Yeah.
And, it was.
They
you're
sure
too
did.
young. You wouldn't.
I've never seen it, but I've heard it. So I'm young, I'm young, but just enough where I've heard it. So
One's not quite so smart, the other is.
Mike, go ahead.
To eliminate this, you can just have one child.
You could, they probably couldn't because they got twins. But yeah, the lesson for us today would be we shouldn't have favorites. And if we do, that's not a good thing. It's not. It's just not a good thing. We should love and care for and treat all our children equally. Otherwise, what we're really doing is we're setting up them to have jealousies and envies and strife and hatred and all of that. That's just not good. We shouldn't do that. God is not that way, right? God's not partial, doesn't show favoritism, all of that. And we want to be more like Him. So I think the lesson for us today would be to strive not to allow that to happen. Might be easier for some than others, might be a struggle for some than others, but it's still something that we should avoid and try to keep at bay. Don't show favoritism. It's only going to breed problems. And the reason this is mentioned is because this is that foreshadowing. We're going to see that this is going to cause problems down the line. And we're going to see that it causes problems down the line when Jacob has children. Now, we won't talk about it tonight, but this is going to continue to roll down the mountain. There's going to be problems that continue to go on. All right. Let's look at verses 29 through 34, unless somebody has a comment or a question on 24 to 28. Comments, questions, thoughts? Okay. Somebody read 29 through 34.
Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he is also called Edom. Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." "Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is my birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some of the bread and some of the lentil stew. He ate and drank, and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright.
All right, so what's going on in these verses? Now again, just notice that we've skipped a number of years. Right? We don't even have their infancy, what they're doing as children or anything. They're adults at this point in time. So what's going on in this section?
Esau was working and was really hungry, I guess. And Jacob was cooking.
Yeah. And you remember that Jacob is a homebody, right? He's dwelling in the tent, his homebody, probably pretty good cook. Learning from his mom, right? Pretty good cook. Esau is what kind of man? A manly man. Jacob's a mama's boy, and Esau is a manly man. Yeah, he's out hunting, right? I mean, and I don't know how many here hunt or have hunted. Like everybody's hands goes up. I have not. I don't. Yeah. I've hunted fish. When you go hunting, can you get tired? Can it be a long day, exhausting kind of day, tracking? Yeah, and you got to remember they didn't have modern, guns and different things like that. So he's been out. He's probably really is tired. He's tired. He's hungry. You ever been really hungry? You work maybe all day and you're just, I'm starving. I need some food. I maybe even be hangry. I'm hungry. I'm angry. I need some food. So you can relate to Esau. He's been out all day, he's working hard, comes home to the mama's boy. Mama's boy's got some stew cooking. And what's he want? What's Esau want? Oh, give me some food, buddy. I'm hungry. Give me some food. All right.
There comes that strife. You should look after your brother.
Right. So what did Esau wanted some food? What did Jacob want?
His birthright.
He wanted.
To be born first.
He wanted the firstborn, right? He wanted the double portion. You remember? What's the double portion? It's related to the firstborn. What's the double portion?
The blessing of the father.
It's not the blessing, it's the inheritance.
2/3. Wouldn't it be for 2 kids? They would get 2/3.
Yeah, that's right. So you got 2 kids, you'd split up the inheritance 3 ways, and then the firstborn would get the double. They'd get 2. It doesn't matter how many kids you have, you always do it extra. You divide it up with 1 extra, and then you give the 2 to the firstborn. So he wants the double portion. I want some extra inheritance here. One question we could ask is, was Esau really going to die?
No.
Probably not, right? He's just really hungry. What's that tell us about Esau, though? What kind of a man is he?
I think Jacob got the brains.
Okay, he's got the brains.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's anything like this, but I mean, me and my brother used to do this stuff all the time, I'm the big brother. It doesn't matter. I may say something, but I'm still a big brother. I mean, I don't know.
Sure. Esau seems to be a rash kind of guy. I mean, you read this story, he seems to be, I'm going to die. I need some food right now. And if you don't give me some food right now, I mean, he's probably not going to die, right? He probably could have made it home and eat some beef jerky or something, whatever he had, right? But he's a rash kind of guy. And we know it from the rest of the story. He's quick to kind of react without actually probably thinking through things, right? But what kind of person is Jacob? Manipulative, conniving, scheming, right? He's got his who's he got here? He's got his
mother and his uncle Laban.
Yeah, he's got some of their, right? We talked about this before, and we're going to see it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Children often learn and follow in the footsteps of their parents and the people who are around them. That's an important lesson for us today. And it's not just the parents, it is the parents, but who else is it? Who else influence the children? The next generation.
Grandparents.
Can be anybody. Grandparents. There may or may not be, it depends on the child, but there may be more influence from the parents, the grandparents, the people that are closest. Where else are they going to be influenced? Uncles, brothers, yeah. Where they're living, the environment around them. Are they going to be influenced by the members of the body of Christ? Absolutely. See, you and I, whether or not we have children or grandchildren, or whether they're not here, these children that are around, we influence them. It may be to a greater or a lesser degree, but we ought to keep in mind that we are examples to one another and to the next generation. We want them to be better than us, not worse than us, right? Maybe not even like us. We want them better than we are, right? So here we see the example Rebecca is picking up from her family, and of course it's being transferred here, but also Isaac. Isaac learned some things from his parents too. And we'll see that, not this week because we're almost out of time, but we'll see that maybe next week, that there's some influence there as well. But Esau is Jacob's what? His brother. It's his brother, his relative, his family, right? If Jacob will treat Esau this way, what will he do to outsiders?
Much worse.
At least the same, if not worse, right? This just shows us the character. I mean, if you're going to do this to your own family, right, your own flesh and blood, that kind of thing, what won't you do to other people, right? So Jacob is a conniver, he's a schemer, and we're learning it right here. Now, what was, and you can go back and look, it's just a couple verses back, but what was the prophecy that God gave to Rebekah about the two children?
The older would serve the younger.
The older would serve the younger. It may be, we don't know for sure, okay? But it's not outside the realm of possibility. It could be that Rebekah told Jacob. How does Rebekah feel about Jacob?
It's her favorite.
It's her favorite. So not outside the realm of possibility where Rebekah may have told Jacob the prophecy, right? Listen, don't worry about him. You're my favorite. And you're God's favorite. You're going to rule over your... That could happen, right? We don't know for sure, but I mean, if this is her favorite...
At the very least, God's already promised your brother's going to serve you later, so don't worry about it.
Well, he promised that there's two nations and the older will serve the younger. So we'll see if that ever transpires for the boys. It will transpire for the nations that come from these two boys, but we'll see if the boys, if that happens. But for the moment, it's possible that Rebekah told Jacob about this prophecy and interpreted it that your brother's going to end up serving you. If that's the case, and again, it may not be, but if that's the case, bless you, what might Jacob be trying to do with securing the double portion? Think about it for a moment.
He's just trying to facilitate the prediction.
Maybe.
Like
It's going
Abraham.
to help God out.
Gotta help him out.
Yes, yeah, right. You're seeing that, right? It's potential. It doesn't say in the text, but certainly within the realm of all possibility that Jacob has heard about this prophecy and now he's going to help God out, just like his grandfather helped God out. Took an extra wife, right? Abraham and Sarah, they take an extra wife and they're going to help God out and get a child. Jacob may very well be doing that. Either way, whether he's trying to help God out, trying to get this prophecy kind of going, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. It tells us a lot about who Jacob is and his character. Hello? That must be the time. It's perfect time. You set that on purpose, right? Yeah, people are tired of me going over. They're like, I'll get him. I'm going to have somebody call us. All right. Well, surprise, I'm not going to stop. Any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Can you see some of the, and we've talked about it, but can you see some of the application to our lives? As we read through some of these things, we could see maybe we've made some of these mistakes as well. Maybe we could make those mistakes, or of course there's victories throughout the scriptures and all that. But there's application to our lives here as well. It's not just history, it's good history, but there's also things that we need to take and consider.
You know, I always thought that Jacob was just making stew and Esau just came along and there it was. But now I kind of wonder if this whole thing wasn't kind of set up from the very, Esau's going out hunting we need to make the stew so that when he, it was like set up from the very beginning.
It could be. Again, there's a little bit of speculation in here, right? But it's. You think it's a lot of speculation? I don't know if it's. I think it's reasonable. I think there's some reasonable things we can assume, but it's possible. It's possible. There's some possibilities here. We don't know for sure. It's possibilities. We don't teach that as doctrine, but it's possible. I mean, if we just think these boys have had a long history together. Jacob does know when Esau comes back, this is how he is. So maybe. At the end of the day, he's still a schemer. Whether he planned this or whether it was spur of the moment, he caught his brother and said, I'm going to do it like this. He's still a schemer. We learned something about him. We learned something about Esau. All right, if there's nothing else, let's close in prayer.